Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX14 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode, known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the third race of the second stage of the 2019 Manufacturer Series season, which is a Group 3 race held at the Autodrome Lago Maggiore GP2 circuit. With that, let's get racing. Taking a look at the grid then, you'll see that I've put it on pole with a 2-minute 0.4. My story for qualifying was a positive one, albeit I was well up on my target of a 1:59.4, and I was quite surprised I was able to achieve pole by a significant margin. Now I can attribute this differential in terms of my target time versus my actual time to the fact I went into this race on the back of 2.5 hours of sleep. And this track, Lago Maggiore GP2, demanded a huge amount of concentration and a fine layer of precision going around certain corners, particularly turns 8 through to 12. And if you got it wrong there, you'd see the car go flying off the track. Alternatively, you'd have to brake out of it and cost yourself a lot of time. And that's what happened during my fast lap in particular. I ended up making a good number of mistakes going through the fast lap, hence my target time being missed by such a margin. And now I had to translate this into the race. An 8-lap race, which would be a sprint, no fuel saving was required or pit stops for fresh tyres. Everybody was mandated to use the racing hard tyre, which based on my experience at the Red Bull Ring a little while ago, I realised it would take quite a bit of time to warm that tyre up, and what you're going to see on the opening lap is I actually drive the car well off of the standard pace that one would perhaps expect here, simply because I want to get the warmth in the tyres before I want to push harder in order to get the most out of the tyre life available. On top of that, I had to factor in the fact that because I was running on a low amount of sleep, I would not be able to push the car as aggressively through fear of a higher probability of making mistakes. So one thing you will know over the course of this race is I have the tendency to almost make some mistakes, but it's how I bring the car back under control at the last possible minute, which makes the difference in my opinion between me being able to finish towards the front of the grid or potentially making a mistake that's going to cause me to pick up a penalty or see me go off the track and fall down towards the back. So I wasn't targeting finishing first here, I just wanted to be on the podium where possible, or at least finish within the top 5 as we come to the end of this 20 driver grid, all of us being B driver rating. So we're about to get underway, and what we'll see is with the rolling start, it does get the tyres a little bit warmed up, albeit not too much side to side movement, and we're going to have to get that tyre warmth into the car ourselves. And the first section of this circuit, so turns 1 through to 4, not the most ideal corners for tyre warming, particularly turn 1, which is a difficult corner. If you get one wheel out on the outside of the track, it's game over. But you're going to see that as the car barely moves side to side, much like at the Red Bull Ring. So this is a repeat of that scenario, but we're ready for it as we get underway. And behind us we've got a Lexus who isn't going to catch us too much down the straights, but will catch us in the corners if they drive it cleanly, so we've got to be wary of that. I'm going up the hill into turn 1 here. You'll see that I brake quite prematurely. I get my foot off the throttle and then just gradually ease my way back up into the throttle, using the full width of the track to bring the car around, letting the momentum of the car roll us up into turn 2, and then following through to the left-hander here at turn 3. And so far things are going well. Not getting on the power too early coming out to turn 3, simply because otherwise that lead twist going off the track while the tyre's not being warmed up yet. And coming out to turn 4, we take it conservatively. Could have been a bit tighter, but we get through the first sector cleanly, and the gap between us and the Lexus behind has barely shifted open or closed up, which is absolutely perfect as we now come down the hill here towards the hairpin at turn 7. A wonderful corner this, and you can see that the gap between myself and the Lexus behind is opening up a little bit, and I get the feeling that soon the BMW M6 in third place is going to be pushing that Lexus hard, because that BMW is quite fast down the straights and is getting closer and closer to the rear end of the Lexus, who seems at the moment quite content to settle for second and just hold in the back of my slipstream to help pull them along and hold off the attack from third place. Now going through the high speed sector here, going through turn 9 right now, and then braking down into 4th gear for turn 10. And then we're switching left hand side here for turn 11 and switching back down into third gear for turn 12. You can see already I'm being quite tentative going through this section, whereas I perhaps attack it with a little bit more ferocity, and that's because of the tiredness factor coming in. I really don't want to make a mistake, and we'll talk about the potential mistakes that can be made there as we come out the hairpin at turn 13, getting a little sideways there, but not getting on the throttle too early to counteract that effect. And we can see now behind us the BMW is really pushing to make a move on the Lexus, and I want those two to fight so I can get away, which is why I'm pulling out of the line of slipstream, or the racing line, so the Lexus doesn't benefit too much. As we now come through turn 14, and we can see the Lexus is right behind me here, so I went a bit too heavy on the brakes, and as we come through 15, the BMW is able to get past the Lexus, and that's the case that BMW is going to push really hard to try and get past myself, while them taking a rather different line through the turn 16 compared to myself. As we come through 17 here to complete the lap, it's race, race, race again as we begin lap number 2, and I'm pulling over to the right hand side to try and break the slipstream temporarily that the BMW is benefiting from behind. So now I've got a conundrum. I've got a guy behind me who I know is pushing really hard, and the thing is with this circuit at Lago Maggiore, if you make a mistake on this circuit in certain sections, particularly coming out to turn 1 or 30 through the high speed section, i.e. turns 8 through to 12, that's going to cost you a huge amount of time, as I've already said. And we can see that the BMW behind is being really aggressive. So what I'm thinking to myself is, let the frustration build behind, drive your race, forget about them, drive defensively if you need to, but remember, you're on 2.5 hours of sleep, you cannot push the car to its maximum. Just drive a consistent race, let the guys behind make the mistakes and trying to get past you. As I missed the apex there going down the hill turn 6, now coming up to turn 7, you'll see that I go on the brakes and I get it just about right. The BMW takes a very similar line to myself. I'm immediately going to pull over to the left hand side of the circuit because they're right behind me and I don't want them to benefit from the slipstream, and now weave back onto the racing line coming up to turn 8 here, and it looks as though the BMW is going to be stuck behind us before we get into this section, and we tuck into turn 8 right now, just lifting a little bit, not as to overspeed into turn 9 because we don't want to hit the orange curve there because that will launch the car. And then as we get through turn 10 here, you can see we get nice and clean initially, but then I tuck a little bit too far over to the left hand side going through turn 11, and as a result I almost end up cutting the corner, and if I took 2 wheels off of the circuit off of the curve, that was fine. If I took all 4 off, that would be a half-second penalty minimum. Unfortunately, we were able to get the car back under control despite the rear losing it there, and we, as a result, have not picked up a penalty. We've actually pulled a little bit of time over the BMW as we now head up towards turn 14, coming to the final sector of the lap. And with the gap we now got from the BMW, this means that we can relax a little bit and get ready for the potential fight that begins on lap number 3. And what I'm also doing at this point as well is I'm analysing using the rear view mirror and the timing deltas on the left hand side of the screen where that BMW driver is stronger than me and where I'm stronger than them. And what I've noticed through this lap is I seem to be stronger in sector 1, and in sector 4, particularly coming onto the start finish straight, I'm getting a better run out of turns 16 and 17 through the tighter line I'm taking in 16, and then the more natural line that I'm forcing the car through on turn 17 compared to the BMW having to really push their car around turn 17. As we switch to the replay camera here, the pressure is going to mount, however. Because the thing is, when you're chasing someone, it's about knowing where you can beat them in terms of your sector times and where they're stronger than you and trying to mitigate that strength. And coming through sector 1 here, you'll see that the BMW does a fantastic job coming up into turn 4 of really closing the ground onto me. They brake a little bit later, and that means they're right on my tail as we come to the end of sector 1, going through turn 4. Right there, and now coming down the hill, starting off the left-hander at turn 5 and then going into the right-hander at turn 6. And you're also going to see that I'm going to miss the apex at turn 6 again, a habit I started picking up. Albeit I was just about off the curb, so not too much time lost, but coming down to 7 here, I completely missed the apex compared to the BMW. I don't cut the corner as much as you could, and as a result that means the BMW gets a much faster exit out to turn 7 as we charge up the hill towards turn 8, and they're right up my backside now. Can I prevent them from making a move going into turn 8? Well, they're too far back by looks of things, but they're going to have pressure on my backside all the way through this high speed section, and here I'm just going to have to hold the line and make sure the BMW can't get through. So we go through 9, then coming up into 10 here, the braking zone going down to 4th gear. You can see the BMW just pokes their nose towards the inside but can't get alongside to try and make an effective move, so they have to back out of it as we now come through 12 and then head down the hill here towards the hairpin at turn 13. And they've fallen back a little bit because they know trying to make a move through turns 10 to 12 unless you're side by side is going to be an absolute nightmare for both you and the combatant, in the point that you'll probably take one another off the circuit or cause a massive time loss, and that means we'll have to start fighting against those who are in 3rd place and 4th place, etc. And it is really a fight for first between us two. You can see the rest of the field has fallen back quite a significant margin. But the fight continues as we come through turn 14 here, and you can see that the BMW gets a better run but then goes very sideways coming out of 14, and that's when the mistakes are starting to show. And remember I talked about let the guy behind get frustrated? Well, that appears to start to be happening in the fact they're pushing harder and harder, and what it means is they're more likely to let the rear of their car start sliding. That costs them time, that puts additional tyre wear into the vehicle as we come to the end of lap number 3 and begin lap number 4. And I'm thinking something's got to give in a minute, because I've opened the gap up to a second, and as we come up the hill here, it's going to materialise. Because turn 1, as I said, dangerous corner. You get it wrong here, you're going to lose a lot of time. We come through the corner cleanly, a little bit wiggly, but we keep that under control. In our rear view mirror, the BMW goes off the circuit, and watch the delta start to open up on the left hand side. 1.3, 1.6, 1.9, 2 seconds, 2.3 seconds. It's absolutely perfect. And remember, the dirt they've picked up on their left hand tyres is only going to compromise their ability to make the way through the rest of sector 1, and that means that gap is widening even more now, and we can start to pull off into the distance and try to secure this win. The gap now being 4.2 seconds, it's still expanding, because that BMW's got to try and get rid of the excessive tyre wear they've picked up and the dirt they've picked up as a result of their mistake. Now with the gap opening up to 5.3 seconds, immediately what I'm thinking to myself is, right, don't take the foot off the gas to the point you start to think that you're guaranteed to win this race, because if that happens, then you're bound to make a mistake. But whereas you're driving at, say, 90% of your maximum potential, keeping in mind the tidiness, now let's lower it a little bit further. Let's drop it to 85 to 80%. Keep an eye on that gap. If it really starts to close up, let's turn the wick back up to 90%. But let's drive clean lines, just manage the car. Let's bring it home where possible. And this is an absolutely great feeling at this point, because what I thought to myself is, right, I don't have to put any additional pressure on myself now to win the race. The guys behind have already done that and given me the positional advantage. And that's something which I'm having to learn as well, as you're going to see in future races, no spoilers, but sometimes when you're chasing somebody down, it's not about necessarily being the one to be the aggressor. Sometimes it's just being that constant threat and putting the pressure on the guy in front, so as they're going to make the mistakes. Whereas here it was the reverse, me being the guy in front, and it looks like the BMW's cost their shot at winning so far through the fact they made that little mistake starting lap number 4, and now the gap's widened to the point they've got to do a lot of work to close that gap down. And I don't know what's going through their head right now. They may be thinking, right, I'm going to chase the Honda down over the next couple of laps when we go on to lap number 5. Alternatively, they may have thought, you know, I blew my chance, I'm now going to secure second. But coming back to what we're doing right now, so going on to lap number 5, going up the hill here once again, breaking down to third gear, you can see that I'm taking a much calmer line. I'm not having to fight the car as much. And this is where I'm starting to let go of that additional pressure in my mind. And that's something I do have a tendency, as I've observed through this race. When I'm under pressure from someone, I seem to start having to fight the car a lot more. Whereas if I'm more controlled with the car, more relaxed with the car, I can get much cleaner lines through. And I can start doing the laps which I normally do, say in qualifying sessions or in practice sessions, the ones that look a lot cleaner, and whilst they may look a little bit slow because I'm not constantly fighting at the steering wheel, fighting the rear end of the car, they're actually faster laps in the long haul. Now coming down the hill towards turn 7 once again, you'll see here that we're not going to go as deep this time. We do miss the cutting point on the apex there a little bit, but not too much as to cost us a huge amount of time. It may have cost us 1 to 2 tenths depending on how the BMW takes the corner, but not to the point of us having to worry about it. And looking at the map in the top right hand corner of our screen, what we can see is the Lexus and the BMW seem to be fighting one another for second place right now. So with that fight going on, until the gap between the two spreads enough, what it means is we are guaranteed to be able to effectively hold our position on track in terms of time, staying in the region of 5.5 seconds. It's now opened up to 5.8 seconds because those two are going to be fighting one another. And looking at the rest of the field, we can see the field has broken out into a good number of little groups, and that's something I expected to happen at this circuit, because it is a circuit that demands a huge amount of precision, and once the gaps start to open up, it is very difficult to close those gaps up unless you have a natural pace advantage, whether it's over 1 lap or multiple laps. So that's why I practiced a lot in my practice sessions on being not only fast over a single lap for qualifying to try and get me towards the front of the grid, but also just trying to achieve a level of consistency in lap time over the race distance. And we can see on the right hand side right now, our second lap, the fastest lap of this race so far, was a 2:06, and then we've entered the 2:01s, and I get the feeling that this lap is probably going to be a 2:02 or perhaps even a 2:03, because we have taken off the gas significantly. But still, if we can achieve those consistent lap times and manage the tyre wear as indicated in the bottom left hand corner of your screen, a 2:02.6 there, so we weren't far off in our estimate. If we can manage that tyre wear and keep these lap times consistent, then this win is ours. Now coming through turn 1 again for the 6th time and coming along this section, one thing I must say is that I do like this circuit because it is a very challenging mix of corners and overall technical sections. You have these higher speed corners in section 1 and then going through sector 2 as well. You've also got the high speed set of corners, so turns 5 down into the slower hairpin at turn 7, albeit that's got a significant amount of camber on it, as we're going to see, which means you can actually use the momentum of your car going into the braking zone to throw the car around with the camber and pick up a lot of speed there. And coming down now, here's the example. You can see how much camber's on the road, and as we come down to second gear here, we gradually build ourselves up on the throttle. We're not going to get thrown off the circuit, but we can just bring the car around and get it up into third gear, then up into fourth gear, as we now go charging up the hill here and then down towards turn 8. And then you've got another high speed section here, turns 8 through to 12, which dominates sector 3, and then you've got the lower speed section to wrap up the lap. You've got a whole mix of different corners, different straights, and that means all cars are going to, in an extent, have a strong section and a weak section, which is the great thing about this racing series, the fact that all cars have their strengths and weaknesses, and circuits like this really do demonstrate it. Albeit the high speed cars do have a little bit of an advantage, what there being a significant number of straights and those high speed sections. Now get a little wiggly coming through turn 13 there, but we're letting the overall wiggle the rear end there point our car in towards the apex of turn 13, which is something I didn't mind. I'd happily let the rear end slide out there going into 13 if it helps straighten up my line going through the corner, and by doing that we can then come up the hill towards turn 14, get nice and tight there in second gear, gradually building up the throttle and not forcing the steering wheel too hard, because otherwise we'd do what the BMW did, see the rear end back out. And instead just coming down to 14 now, so not 14, turn 16 on the brakes, keeping it nice and tight, building up the throttle going through 17, then being very careful with second gear not to stamp on the throttle too early, let the car straighten itself out and then get onto this start finish straight, get a nice power output down here, and our lap time it's another 202.6, those consistent lap times really coming into effect. And now as we go to the replay camera again, you're going to see the difference now when we're driving the car with less pressure but with a bit more tyre wear, a bit less fuel in the car, just see the natural racing line we're trying to take and a smoother driving style with an effect compared to what we showed previously. Now other things to note here, in terms of the pressure I felt, do I feel as though the competition is starting to heat up now, what this being another B driver rating lobby but towards the top end of the B driver rating scale? Definitely, I am seeing, well based on this race alone, more and more drivers who are matching me in terms of race pace or in terms of single lap qualifying time, and it's absolutely great to see. I mean, I'm not complaining about the previous results, you have to go with the flow. Eventually you are going to bump into fiercer competition, it's natural in a progressive league system, but that's what I love about this game, in the fact that sometimes I'm going to be miles ahead of the rest of the competition, sometimes I won't be, but over each race it will naturally balance out as we move up the ratings, and I can't wait to see what opposition I'm going to face in the future races. Going through turn 8 once again then, the wonderful thing about the sections of the circuit as well is if you get them wrong you're going to be punished severely for it, and that's what I love about most circuits. If you get the track wrong, if you make a corner incorrectly, you are going to be punished. I'm not keen on tracks with huge runoff areas, or areas which don't have grass I should say, just large tarmackable surfaces, because whilst there's less grip there, I don't feel as though you're punished as much as you are here. If you run off onto the grass and then decide to try and apply the brake to start the car, well you're going to be going off into the barriers or just completely spinning the car off. As a result, that demands that level of precision which I talked about at the start, which this circuit entertains wonderfully. Now coming into turn 14 once again here, not getting on the power too soon, we can see that the gap between myself and the BMW behind has closed up significantly over the last couple of laps, but I'm not too worried. It's roughly in the region of 2.5 to 3 seconds right now. They are pushing quite hard once again, but again the pressure is on them to make up the lost time, not for me to have to worry about them unless they get within a second of my car, as we come to the end of lap number 7 and begin the final lap. Now one correction I should make is something that has changed quite recently. Just before this race, I believe, if not a little bit earlier, the slipstream zone as applied to the Group 3 and Group 4 category cars is now to a 1 second window approximately, not a 0.8 second window. So you will be seeing, and you will have seen in this race, but you will be seeing in the future races, that the slipstream effect is a little bit more potent, and that's going to make the races more entertaining hopefully. Well, at least I think it will. Already these races are highly entertaining for me as the driver, hopefully they are for you as the viewer. And that gap, as we said, has come down to the 3 second window, so I could afford to just ease myself around. And the last lap that I did was a 203.4. You can see that I have really started to drop down to 85 to 80% because I feel confident that I've got this in the bag so long as I don't make any silly mistakes. And why invite a silly mistake now by overdriving the car in its final state? Let's just take it easy. So coming down the straight here towards turn 8 once again, getting ready for the high speed section. And the reason you don't want to be on that orange curve going through turn 9, I said earlier it launches the car. What it can do, it can either launch the car, as in cause the front end to lift up and send you flying off in a straight line, or it can launch the car further over to the left hand side of the circuit and offer the racing surface onto the other tarmac going into turn 10, at which point there's less grip available and you've really got to stamp on the brakes and put excessive tyre wear through the car to make turn 10, and that's something I really didn't want to do, because then there'll be a high chance of you going off the circuit and picking up a penalty. Coming through turn 13 there, we get it nice, albeit the back end wiggles a little bit because we're a bit too aggressive on the throttle there. And now just charging up the hill towards turn 14. Getting ready to go up into 5th gear, and now braking down just as we see the red surface come along on the right hand side, going down to 2nd gear, keeping it nice and tight to the apex, not overdoing it. We can see the BMW behind went a little bit wider on the corner there, not costing them too much time, albeit it has opened up the gap by 2 tenths. Now coming down into turn 16 and in the final corner at turn 17, we're going to be pulling over to the right hand side once we come out of turn 17 to say hi to the pit crew on the right hand side of the surface, but we bring the NSX home in a secure 1st place. Having had time to reflect, this race was all about there being no room for error, and on my part, I didn't make any major mistakes, whereas in the case of the competing BMW, they made the mistake that cost them their chance of going for the race win on lap number 4. It's unfortunate, but they put me under pressure for 2 laps, and that pressure, I must admit, was building massively, and I did feel as though would I be able to hold on for long. In the end, we were able to do it. And one thing I will definitely need to do is get more sleep before future races, because I'm not going to lie, doing a race in 2.5 hours sleep is very difficult. But still, it's time to move on to the 4th race of Stage 2 at the Circuit de Santa Croix A circuit on Wednesday the 14th of August 2019. Until then, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. I've been TX141, and until next time, take care and drive safely.